Welcome. I just wanted to welcome you guys to the Out Film Connecticut screening of the film Firebird, and we are very lucky to have the director Peter Rebane and Tom Pryor, who is the lead actor and producer and writer and everything else. So welcome, guys.
Hi.
Hi.
Did I pronounce your last name right, Peter?
Oh, absolutely. It's in Estonia it's Rebane, but the American version is Rebane. So
Okay. Well, congratulations on the success of the film so far. I know it's playing all around the U.S. right now, opening and closing nights of almost all of the LGBTQ film festivals. So, congratulations! You must be thrilled to be getting the film out there.
Yeah, it's nice to see that some people are enjoying the film. That's for sure.
Actually, seeing people actually sitting in seats and in audiences must be a thrill. So I know the film premiered virtually in London earlier this year, and I also know it premiered in the Moscow um, International Film Festival. Could you tell us a little bit about that experience, just because of the climate towards LGBTQ issues in Russia these days?
well, I actually promised to eat my hat if we are invited to the festival, and probably still need to do that. It was quite surprising. They had two LGBT titles out of the 147 films, and the Russian title was actually never screened. They canceled the film, and actually, the festival director went on record and said in an interview that he faced a choice whether to cancel the film or fire his program manager. And our film was fortunately not cancelled. The first screening went ahead, but then and actually got like really positive feedback from the audience. And then the next day, some people wrote a letter to the Russian state prosecutor asking the film to be banned. And there were literally protesters in front of the cinema with banners, "Stop homosexual propaganda." So I think the festival was under immense political pressure, and at one point, the night before our second screening, they cancelled all of our VIP and guest invites, all of the press invites, stopped the ticket sales, and basically played the film to an almost empty auditorium.
Hmm. Well, I that's incredible. Now I understand that the script was based on the memoirs of Sergey Fedosov, and um, and at the end of the film, we learn that Sergey passed away in 2017. Um, so, did you get a chance to meet with him and talk to him about the film and your development of the film?
Yeah, we through the writing of the process, or the process of the writing, we basically had worked through his material, and we got to the point where I was like, actually, it'd be kind of really cool to go and meet him and see if he actually wants to meet. So, yeah, Peter and I made the trip to Moscow actually to meet Sergey, and it was really there where, as the screenwriters, we were asking him where uh, sort of like reality ended and fiction began in the memoir, because he's writing the memoir really about 30 years after it happened, and it was released in Russia in the early 90s, probably one of the most liberal times actually that there was there, really, around these particular human rights. And a lot of people had actually written to him confidentially, saying how much the story had sort of impacted them, or they'd had some similar experiences. And so, yeah, when Peter and I decided to go to Moscow, and we literally spent like a few days with him, and just like shared some like meals, and interviewed him quite extensively about his life with Roman and living on the Air Force base. And it kind of dawned on us that it's actually quite a responsibility to be adapting somebody's life into a film. And it was actually also during that time, it was about a year later actually that we learned that he passed away. And we actually decided to go to his funeral. We asked his best friend, who actually had brought the original manuscript to Berlin Film Festival, where Peter had discovered it, if it was appropriate for us actually to go to the funeral. And he was like, yeah, of course. And so we actually made the trip to Moscow, and then 3 hours outside to Oriel, where actually he was from. He actually created and built a theater there. And so there was a wake outside the theater there, and then a very traditional Russian Orthodox funeral. And it was kind of in that moment that we sort of stood there as the filmmakers, going like, okay, like we have a real responsibility now to leave his legacy. And it was quite overwhelming for me, particularly like as the actor that's going to play him in the film, to do his story justice. And so, on the days that when we were filming, it was super tough. Like I almost like felt like I'd let him down, if I hadn't kind of quite got to sort of where I kind of was trying to push myself to get to with the performance. But yeah, it was a really amazing process to be able to go and get to know the real person that you're going to play, and also a real shock to experience their passing in the time of the making of the film.
Yeah. And, I know that you started writing it long before you actually met him, but once you did meet him, were there changes that you made? You talked a little bit um, about reality and where fiction starts and reality stops. And were there things that you did artistically um, that you didn't get from the book, or whatever, or what were some of the changes that you made after meeting with him?
I think there were like intricacies in the details of their life, particularly things like, what would they be eating, like what music would they be listening to, and really the emotional nuances, the way that he would speak about Roman in this sort of very loving and nostalgic way that that Roman had not really been very long departed from their life. I think that really meeting him clarified several things, one of which being, and it was a real wish of his, that we make this film about love, not about politics, because of course, like it's a very political subject matter as well. And we actually kind of agreed in that vein to make it. And so, if it is received in a political way, then that is, that's the reality, and that's the time that we live in. But when we were making fundamental decisions about the story, it was really about making it about his true life, about his true experiences. And really, I think probably from that, which really informed a lot of the decisions, particularly as we at points got like a little bit diverted in the screenplay to making it maybe a little bit more thriller, or making it a little bit more of something that, say, the film business would have liked our film to be more like. So, and so we kind of either could have gone much more art house, we could have gone much more sort of Cold War thriller and made it much more dramatic. But we kind of remained really as true as we could to his original story, and then sort of like filled out those moments of details through meeting him. And also then for me, again, as an actor, like to really take on his persona. Like it was actually amazing to spend the time with him, to how he spoke to people and how he kind of like how his perspective was about certain issues, to really kind of bring that through. But I'm sure Peter can add something to the
Yeah,
details that we went into.
Peter, I understand you grew up in Estonia, or were born in Estonia, and maybe if you could talk about how this story is personal to you in any way.
Well, first of all, when I received the story some almost 10 years ago, I was really taken just by the quite a tragic human story in it. And I was also almost amazed at how could such a story have existed at the time and the place in the 1970s and height of the Cold War. And my personal connection is having grown up at the time as a very young boy under the Soviet occupied Estonia, um, where you really had to fully repress your identity. I could never. I came out. I think I was 26 years old to my parents, and it's really, really also amazing that our summer cottage was just a few miles from this Air Force base. So could never have imagined that I'll one day make this story or that these people lived and these events happened there, which this is an amazing reminder how love has always existed and different non-traditional family models have always existed through the times, and also one, I think, important reason to tell this story, and especially to tell it to the audiences in Russia, and hopefully change some people's perspective.
Great. Now, your background has been in documentary filmmaking before this, right? This is your first
Yes.
narrative feature film. How is directing a narrative feature different, and what was your biggest challenge in making the film?
I think documentaries are also very, very different. My personal style, or what I prefer, is to stay as neutral as it is possible, as observational. So I'm never in the frame myself in any of the documentaries that I've made, and neither in voiceover or in picture. And I think in narrative filmmaking, the amazing bit is that you have the liberty as a director to really uh, enforce your point of view. Whereas in a documentary, it's the opposite. I always try to minimize my point of view to be as observational and objective. And it's really amazing because in a feature, you can take a story and make your best to impact the audience, and that's what I really love about it. Love about filmmaking is to tell other true human stories and make a little difference in people's lives.
Speaking of you staying out of the frame, I seem to remember in the last scene, I thought I caught a glimpse of you 2 seats back from Tom, in the audience at the final theatrical show. Did I see that correctly?
Yep, I'm actually in at least 4 places in the film.
Oh,
So yeah, we should do a competition and offer some amazing prize to the person who got all the 4 places.
yeah. So Tom wasn't the only one acting in the play, in the film.
Well, that's more for fun. So
So Tom, you also wore many hats for the film. Obviously, you were the lead character, but also you were a writer of the film and also became a producer. So could you tell us a little more of your background with the film and how you got involved and how you know, ended up taking on such a expansive role in the creation of the film?
Sure. I'm also like many other things in the film, but we haven't really credited that bar the music supervision as well. But yeah, the actual meeting of Peter and I came about. I was in Los Angeles in 2014 December, and I was introduced to a film financer who Peter had actually met at the time, as well. And actually, she had read one of Peter's earlier drafts of the script, and she actually, we were just having a meeting, and she was like, "Oh, I just read the script, and I think you'd be really good to play the lead character in this film." And she sort of mentioned about what it was about, and I was like, "Wow, that sounds really interesting." And so she introduced us a few weeks later back in London, and then, I then read the script and was really moved by the story, and also it was a bridging of many worlds, and which fascinated me, like the military backdrop. I've grown up loving James Bond and Jason Bourne and Tintin and so like, you know, this whole kind of like Cold War era and sort of thriller element of narratives has always really fascinated me. And then there was also like the curiousness of a relationship of this type, and I've always been fascinated by the line between friendship and something more. And so it was many different things that really appealed to me. And so Peter and I then basically decided to shoot a teaser that was like basically 3 scenes from the film, sort of shot to full professional standard to sort of show the proof of concept and to raise the rest of the financing, because a project of this size and scale obviously was going to take quite some financing, and for an independent production, we are 100% privately financed, and that you know was kind of quite a long slog in getting the money together and taking all kinds of trips to all kinds of bonkers places like St. Tropez to have to find the right people to help finance the film. So that was obviously like another element of it, and yeah, then really it's a real honor to be able to have been one of the co-writers. I started giving Peter a bit of feedback when we were shooting this teaser about how some of the dialogues might be improved, or we could make them sound a bit more like the way that people actually speak. And that dug me a really big hole into then embracing a 2.5 year co-writing creation together, where we really did restructure the whole film, redraft the whole film many times, put in much more of the kind of political context, and also the element of kind of thriller as well that actually we decided to put into the film. Because when I came to the project, it would have been a much more art house type film, and I'm not necessarily saying for better or for worse, but we just decided to take it in this direction, which allowed it to feel a lot more like that it was actually on an actively working Air Force base. And so when we met like Sergey in Moscow, for example, we then sort of decided to really put in this accident sequence where Ramon almost loses the plane and Sergey saves him, simply to make it look like it was actually there, as opposed to having a backdrop. We actually wanted to have an active working base. And again, that as a producer increased the budget significantly. And, you know, we had an amazing VFX team who did absolute miracles on almost no money to make it actually look like there actually are planes flying around in the sky. And actually, like, you know, creating an Air Force base which doesn't exist. So there were lots of different elements of the story which has been so amazing to be so immersive on so many different levels. And I have just so much like thanks and gratitude to Peter and you know our extended team for that trust as well in the kind of creative decisions. I mean, we worked together, Peter and I, and our music composer in Warsaw in January 2020, all 3 of us together, literally like putting the music together for the whole film. And that was such an amazing creative alliance to have, to everybody having their own equal input into how we wanted to score the film. So yeah, it's kind of funny, but like actually the acting is probably like the least that I did in the whole film production now, which is kind of quite funny, really, as regards to sort of like time investment. And yeah, now we're on the road to getting the film distribution and creating that as a future as well.
Great. Could you tell me a little bit about the casting of Oleg as Roman, and you know what? Obviously, you were attached to Tom or very early on, but could you tell us a little bit about Oleg?
Well, we couldn't get Tom Cruise; he was busy. And then we were facing a dilemma that at whom do we cast, and we opened up the casting for all of the world. Really, we made from early on a very clear decision that we look for the best possible person for this role, and we didn't want to limit with any one particular country, especially since we made the decision to shoot it with very, very subtle, slight Russian accents, as we again didn't want to make this, typical Russian accent type of film, and also it felt wrong to do it in standard English, which was quite a tough challenge for the actors, I think, to kind of have this subtle Russian influence. So, long story short, we were casting for about 3-4 months. We got 2,500 self tapes
Wow.
for the three main parts besides Sergey. And after those 3 months, we still hadn't found our Roman, and we were getting a bit worried as it was end of May and we were shooting in September. We were casting in Moscow, and he walked into the room, and I think it was in seconds it was clear that that was Roman, except for one little issue that he didn't speak much English at the time.
So, so do you think in the political climate in Moscow with the, their laws against homosexual propaganda, do you think there was a risk for him in actually taking the role because he's a Russian actor, or do you think the media surrounding the film will like help propel his career?
I think, in light of that, he's actually a Ukrainian actor.
Okay.
It's even more difficult, especially considering the kind of silent war going on between Russia and Ukraine. I think at the time he really was brave to be like, I don't care, I love this role and this story, and I do it. And I think now today, it's a good question. I really hope and trust that it doesn't affect his career in Russia, but if it does, then it just means there will be a career elsewhere. But it's interesting because the situation in Russia is so complicated. I have so many amazing friends, and I really, really, honestly love the people that we have met and spent time with in Russia. Very open, very warm, and very hospitable. But the political system is a different story, and obviously, for whatever reason, the political system has decided that the LGBT community is an evil one to blame for many problems in that society.
Yeah, you talked a little bit about the language and filming it in English with an accent. Um, could you talk a little bit more about like the decision around not filming it in Russian with subtitles, and what went into that decision?
I think the foremost decision, and it was a very long and considered decision that we discussed together with Tom and with Brigitte, our production time producer. Um, it was really to make the film accessible and available as widely as possible. I mean, especially looking now at the amount of amazing feedback we've gotten in the States. Uh, the share of box office of foreign language films is minute,
Yeah.
and we very, I think, consciously and understanding that the most authentic way to tell it would be in Russian language. We made the decision to shoot it in English so that more people could actually participate and see the film, especially like on TV, for example. It would be, I think, next to impossible to distribute it in many of the English speaking countries.
Yeah, there are also lots of references to Shakespeare throughout the film, and Shakespeare quotes and plays and Shakespeare plays, and all sorts of references to Shakespeare. Was that realistic of Russia at the time, or Estonia at the time?
Well, it was really curious to find out in hindsight how connected it was to the material. So when I started actually writing together with Peter, I don't know why, but I had this kind of like desire to put Shakespeare in and really pull out the aspect of him becoming an actor. And I was like, oh, maybe that's like my own Royal Academy training in London, and my kind of classical fascination with Shakespeare, which has always been so big influence on me. But actually, then when I went to read the original manuscript, there's actually a number of chapters of the book which start with Shakespeare quotes. And I was like, okay, so there's definitely some connection going on here. And then when we met Sergey in Moscow, he basically confessed to us that, you know, he had learned every single one of the sonnets of by heart before even going to drama school. And so Shakespeare was incredibly important to the real Sergey. And then I was like going like, this is really curious. I was like, but was Shakespeare that accessible in, you know, in the Soviet Union during that time? And I started digging into some research, and you know, I think it was 1963, there were over 300 different productions of Shakespeare which went on in the Soviet Union that year. And so, you know, Shakespeare was incredibly prevalent and being performed and celebrated in the Soviet Union. And so what has started out to be is something kind of quite curious, and some people go like, how is this relevant? Particularly like people in England as well, being like, why did you put Shakespeare in? And actually we go, well, because time and time again it showed itself through the real Sergey, and you know, in the context of the time. So that was one reason. And you know, the certain lines that we chose, certain examples that you know, I kind of wanted to put in, even if it's sort of subliminally, you know what I'm saying? Like, if it gets in there, you know, one of the quotes from Hamlet being, there is nothing either good or bad, but thinking makes it so. Just these kind of moments in the film to just like maybe pull out and maybe make people think a little bit more about kind of going, what is this really about? And our editor actually did something quite interesting about putting the to be or not to be where it is actually in the film as well. Yeah. Some people have, you know, pulled out saying, is that, you know, to be gay or to not to be. And you know, that was not actually in the position as where it is in the film right now when we wrote it. And so there have been these kind of moments, and you know, the argument of Shakespeare around Romeo and Juliet, and you know, what's true love and how does true love behave. These moments, you know, I feel very humbled to have, you know, the knowledge of such incredible writing and to be able to reference it and put it into the film and share these viewpoints, which, you know, he made all these hundreds of years ago, so ahead of his time and still so relevant today.
All right, my last question about the film is in the very, very last scene after the credits, when you see the KGB officer in the car, was that your nod to the theory that the KGB is ultimately was responsible for his disappearance, Roman's disappearance?
I would leave it up to the interpretation of everyone who watched the film. I think it's important to notice the sound design, what we hear in the background, to place it. As you can probably hear, there are some people exiting the theater in the evening at nighttime. That's my clue.
Okay. All right. Well, I really want to thank both of you for taking the time to spend some time with us, and wish you the best with the rest of the rollout of the film.
Thank you very much. We wish we could be there physically, but the travel schedule has been hectic, and there are so many amazing things happening at the same time. But also glad that we could do this little Q&A for all of you virtually.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks Tom. So much.